If you're not familiar with the Fate series, the easiest way I can put it is a bunch of stand users enter into a tournament where the winner gets to make whatever wish they have come true, just without all the poses and the questionable fashion choices. Well, sometimes. Now, I'm not the biggest Fate fan out there since the overall lore always seemed like a pain to dive deep into, especially with the series having so many iterations and a watch order that rivals that of the Monogatari series. Like, you know it's too much when you need a guide to tell you how to follow the story from beginning to end. So I'll just stick with watching the anime based on people's recommendations and even dabble with playing Grand Order from time to time. But when I heard that one of my favorite developers, Omega Force, was getting their hands on the series to make a game of their own, you know I had to check it out. I'll get into the juicy details of course, but right from the jump I have to say that Fate Samurai Remnant was a much different game than what I expected, and I mean that in a good way. So if you're someone who's just expecting another Dynasty Warriors type game with nothing but mindless combat for hours, change that mindset right now. Omega Force seems to get even better with every spin-off they create, and Remnant is a clear example that shows that they know how to cater to audiences. If you're a Fate fan who enjoys the character development and plot twists, then I'm glad to say that you will not be disappointed with this game. Starting off the story just wouldn't be right if they didn't add in that one important piece to set the mood. That's right, they actually put in a real anime opening. Now they didn't have to go out of the way to add this of course, but the attention to detail here is just a taste of what the full package has to offer. You play as a samurai named Iori who is a disciple of the Niten Ichiryu sword style. We follow along his journey through this new Holy Grail War, or in this case, the Waxing Moon Ritual. He's met with his servant Saber, who uses a sword with the powers of water at their disposal. You'll come across many other masters and servants, both allies and foes, who will be fighting for their own reasons throughout the ritual. And there's a ton of depth in the cutscenes, dialogue, and side quests that continually adds context to the overall story. Now, coming from the series that's known best for its stunning visuals in the anime, the cinematics in Remnant do not disappoint. Everything was on point from the visual effects to the lighting and also the use of vibrant colors. The art style they aim for works very well for the Edo period story, using graphics that often resemble older Japanese paintings. And throughout my 30 hours of playing, I felt myself getting more invested in everything they had to offer, because this story is extremely detailed with plenty of opportunities to get to know each character that you can play as and even fight against. As you travel through locations, Saber will often stop and ask questions about things you don't understand, and also attractions and food places in this time period. Small things like this happen pretty frequently, and it's nice having those moments where you can bond and get to know these two even better. The amount of intertwining stories and connections between each of the masters and servants is crazy. There's even a lot of story that takes place between Iori and another berserker servant. I'm not gonna say too much because of course there's spoilers, but I found it funny that a majority of the marketing shows her, even though she's not as important as they make her out to be. I was legit confused when I first started this and I didn't see her as our main servant. Like, even the main DLC bonus was a whole outfit that was specifically for her. I don't know, it's kind of random, but I just wanted to mention that somewhere in here. With a story that always moves forward without getting thrown off track, every chapter feels like it's brimming with so much info, dialogue, and action. Even when you do the side quests, none of them will waste your time with some meaningless tasks. Everything focuses on the servants that you meet, the masters you fight against, and the connections between each of the teams. And even when you come across rogue servants, they'll take you through quests that end up being heartfelt, funny, or even sometimes a little odd. But everything ties back into who these characters are and the way you interact with them through the dialogue and also through battles as you progress. The towns you travel through are fairly large, but there aren't a ton of activities and things to do. And I couldn't help but think of the Yakuza series as I was playing, and how those cities are small but bustling with sub-stories and mini-games around every corner. And I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker, but it would have been nice to see this empty space filled with things to do between quests. But when it comes to gameplay, there's a ton of different mechanics that unlock as you continue through the plot. At a glance, it may seem overwhelming, but they don't drop everything in your lap without giving you a hefty amount of dialogue in a tutorial first. These are things like a workshop that you can upgrade to create items and weapon enhancements, plus being able to do some mini games to carve wooden statues and polish your blades to give you an EXP boost for future battles. Then we have an expansive skill tree for Iori, Saber, and every other playable servant that you come across. Filling this thing out will take a lot of time, so you may need to come back for the New Game Plus if you want everything unlocked. But the combat is where things get heated up, and if you're used to the way that Warriors games are played, I'm sure that you already know the deal here too. You have your basic attacks and heavy attacks, each with their own combo strings, with the one main difference here being the spells that Iori has access to, like shooting fireballs or increasing his stats temporarily. These use up your magic stones, and while you can use magic whenever you want, you're limited based on how many stones you can bring into battle at one time. It's a nice way of giving Iori an extra bit of power while also keeping him in check, because a lot of enemies that you'll face will have stagger gauges, and unfortunately Iori isn't very useful against those unless he has magic on his side. But luckily that is where Saber and the other servants come into play. Saber in particular has a wide variety of attacks you can use while playing as Iori or when controlling Saber. These include attacks that Saber uses by themselves or team attacks that have both Iori and Saber taking on an opponent together. And of course you have other servants who can use attacks on their own and that you can play as, such as Lancer and Archer, but we won't get too deep into that since some of those may or may not be a spoiler. Just know that servants are very helpful, but they won't always be available in most fights since using them is tied to different gauges and bars that refill as you attack or use items. But that's where Iori's multiple sword styles come into play and bring a decent amount of diversity. You have a variety of different stances to choose from, each being unique with their own strengths, weaknesses, and combos. Earth stance is defensive and better against strong opponents or one-on-one fights. Water stance deals quick attacks that are better for taking out groups of enemies. Then as you progress, you unlock Wind Stance, which mixes in spells to your attacks. Fire Stance is slower, but your damage scales as you get lower on health. Then Void Stance is best when you're at full health, where it deals the most damage while also being a bit longer range. You can swap between each one at certain times to activate effects that carry over from the previous one. For example, if you swap from Water Stance to Fire Stance, you'll have all the advantages of the Fire Stance. But you can also send out waves of water that can reach opponents from a much farther distance. The level of detail in battles is something that at times may seem a bit overwhelming, but it adds so many routes for you to find the playstyle that suits you best. As you go through each chapter, you'll be faced with something new called leyline battles. And these leyline battles are a mix between normal fights and a strategy board game as you fight to take control over magic areas on the map. So as you progress forward, you can create new lines for yourself and destroy enemy lines. There's a few different items and tactics you can use to overcome each challenge, with the main objective being to take over the enemy base. But be careful though, since your base can also be taken, which immediately means a game over. At the end of each leyline battle, you'll build up energy that will be added to your stats when the fights are complete. Honestly, I wish there was more of this outside of the main plot, because it became even more fun as I unlocked more allies to help take over spots on the board. Hopefully when the DLC comes out, we'll see more of it because it was a great addition. In between Holy Grail battles, you'll have chances to do quests for citizens and raise your reputation. And that includes things like going to food stands, fending off thugs, and even petting stray cats and dogs. There's also commissions you'll get along the way that you can turn in for even more rewards like items and upgrade materials. These can go back into building up your workshop, but they also help when crafting magic stones or enhancing parts of your weapons. And yeah, you can change out the parts to enhance your attack, defense, and other stats. Plus you'll have the option of not only choosing what's the most powerful attachment, but also what will give you specific traits like increased damage to monsters. It's another layer to combat that can be powerful in the right hands, or if you want, you can just choose whatever is the most powerful. Obviously I could say more about it, but I don't want to go too deep into the story parts, and I don't want to give too much away because there's a lot here that you want to experience yourself. Especially when it comes to names of the servants and their noble phantasms, there's a lot here that you really don't want to have spoiled for you. Fate Samurai Remnant was a game that I expected to be yet another fun warrior spinoff, but ended up being a well-written story with plenty of depth for each character. Plus, the amount of extra options for combat were dished out in a way that I never expected to be so good. With there being so much added here, I like that it was rolled out at a steady pace throughout the whole game and never felt like a chore. So even after you play for 20 hours, you're going to see even more new stuff rolled out, and it's going to feel really refreshing. If you're looking for something that's non-stop action, then you're probably not going to find that here. But if you are a fan of the Fate series, or you're just looking for something that has a bit more story to it, then this is going to be perfect for you. Let me know what you guys think about Fate Samurai Remnant. Are you a fan of this being filled with a rich story? Or do you wish it was more action-packed like some of the other Warriors games? I'd love to hear what you all think about it. Subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you all in the next video.